Hey, I'm Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC. In this video, I'm going to show you how to check and adjust the valves on the late model KTM and Husqvarna 450s, 500s, and 501s. You should be checking your valve clearance as part of your routine maintenance, and this is going to help prevent hard starting issues and a poor idle. If you wait too long and you start having those issues, they can lead to bigger problems down the road, and you don't want those things to happen while you're out riding. So make sure you stay up on your maintenance schedule. Now this is a 2020 Husqvarna FC 450, and the schedule for this is after the first break-in ride and then every 30 hours thereafter. So whatever bike you're working on, you want to refer to your model specific service manual or your owner's manual for those specs and more information throughout the process. Now this is going to be a similar process for 2019 and newer Husqvarna and KTM 450s, 500s, and 501s. Now this is the newer style of single overhead camshaft. So if you have two plugs in the side of your cylinder head above your spark plug, that's the older style. We do have a video on that, as well as if you have a 250 or 350, we have a video that shows you how to take care of dual overhead camshafts. But if you have the same style of camshaft that we do, then let's go ahead and get this check done. Now you always want to start out with a clean bike and have the engine at room temperature. Then we can go ahead and remove the left side panel, our seat, and our gas tank. And you always want to make sure this O-ring is in good condition. Now since we have the cover off, we're going to be cleaning this air filter, and that way it can be drying well. We do all the valve adjustment stuff and then we'll put it back in. And we're going to put a rag in the air box to keep any dirt from getting in the engine. Now even though we washed our bike, when we removed all the panels, there's a lot of dirt, so we're going to clean it off. So after that, we can remove our valve cover, and we're also going to remove the spark plug. The next thing we need to do is get our engine on top dead center on the compression stroke. So on this, there's a dot on the cam sprocket. We need this dot to come to the top at its highest point. It's going to be in the center of this little tab right here on that retaining bracket. And the easy way to do this is put your bike in high gear. You're going to rotate the rear wheel in its normal direction of rotation. And then you can watch these intake valves open and close. As soon as they close, in other words, the spring comes all the way up, you can watch this dot come around to that high point, and that's going to be top dead center on the compression stroke. Now if you have an auto clutch, it's going to be the same steps, but you can actually use the starter motor just to bump this to that top point. Now to measure the valve clearance, we're going to take our feeler gauge and insert it between the rocker arm and the shim for each valve. And the intake spec is going to be 0.1 to 0.15 millimeters. The exhaust is 0.12 to 0.17 millimeters on this bike. Always refer to the specs for your bike. Now, when you insert the gauge, you want to feel some slight drag, and that's going to be the correct measurement. If you have to force the gauge in, it's obviously too big, and if it feels a little loose, then you want to use the next size up feeler gauge until you get that slight drag. Now, once you take the measurement, you want to write that down, and that way you can calculate the new shim thickness for any valves that are out of adjustment. If any of these valves were out of adjustment, you'll need to remove the rocker arm shaft for whichever valves you need to adjust. So we're just going to remove both and show you how to get these shims calculated and changed out. So we'll start by removing, this is our camshaft retaining bracket. We're going to pull both of these bolts out. And then we need to remove the right side bolts that hold these rocker shafts in place. Next, we're going to take an M6 by 1.0 thread pitch bolt. So pretty much any 6mm bolt on your bike. We're going to thread this in to the rocker arm shaft, and then we can pull it out. If this does not come out easy, you might have to get a little creative. Ours feels kind of stuck, so I'm just using some angled needle nose pliers, and when I push out on that, it's going to allow that to slide out. You just want to keep a hand on the rocker arm. We'll remove that and just keep an eye on those shims as well. Make sure they don't drop down into the engine. Then we can do the same thing for the exhaust rocker shaft and rocker. We're going to have to push that hose out of the way. And now we can remove any shims that we need to change out. Now when you remove everything, make sure you lay it out in order. That way you can get the shims back in the correct spots, and it's going to help with reassembly. Now with all our parts laid out on the bench, we're going to use some contact cleaner and get everything cleaned up and do a quick inspection. Once you have those cleaned off, these rocker arm shafts, you're going to check for any visible damage to them. If there's any deep grooves, then chances are these rocker arms, this bore in here is probably worn out as well. You'd want to replace these as a set. Now on the rocker arms, you have these pads. There is going to be an arcing motion to them. So as long as they still have the arcing motion and there's no visible damage, then you should be good to reuse these. On the exhaust rocker, you're going to pay special attention to this roller. Make sure there's no up and down play in it or any grooving. Now, any parts that are damaged, make sure you find out why they were damaged and replace any parts necessary. Now for the shims, we only had one valve that was close to the limit. It wasn't quite out of spec, but we'll still show you how to correct a valve that is out of spec using this one. So the first thing you need to do is use your digital calipers and measure the shim. So on this one, this is 2.28 millimeters thick. So you want to write that down on your sheet. So for us, we're going to use this formula. This is how I like to write everything out. This is just the way things are laid out on the bike. So our exhaust valves, they were 0.13 millimeters each, and the spec on those is 0.12 to 0.17. They're a little bit on the tighter side, but not bad. And then the intake, your 0.1 to 0.15 millimeters. We had one at 0.13 and one at 0.10. And even though they were in spec, we'll show you how to check this if one was out of spec. Now, we'll just say this one was at 0.09 millimeters, and we'll plug it into our math formula. I mean, really, it's just simple subtraction, but this helps make sure you have the right shim every time. So the formula is A equals B minus C in parentheses plus D. So A is your new shim thickness, B is the recorded valve clearance, or what you measured, and then C is your specified valve clearance. Now this, if you measured 0 clearance, you're going to want to go on the bigger end. So if we had 0 right here, we'd want to go with 0.15, but since we didn't have 0, we want to go right in the middle, and it would actually be nice to match the other side at 0.13. So you can plug that into the formula. So 0.09 minus 0.13 plus that old shim thickness, 2.28 millimeters. You work that out, and your new shim thickness is going to be 2.24 millimeters. Now for the shims, I prefer to get a kit, and that way if you have to do a valve adjustment down the road, you're not going to have to order more parts. Order this one time, you're done. 8.9 millimeter outside diameter is correct for these bikes, and then these range from 1.72 to 2.60, and they go up in 0.04 increments. Now with the kit, and if you want to get individual shims, that's totally fine, but one thing I like about this is a 2.28. I can reuse this at some point if I ever need to. And then we'll just grab our 2.24 millimeter shim, and we'll get this stuff reinstalled back onto the bike. And make sure when you reinstall everything, you're going to want to apply assembly lube. to all the parts. And then the rocker arm shafts, this is really important. This side with the cutout is going to be facing up. And then if I rotate this one over, there is an extra little oil hole right there. This is going to be the intake rocker shaft. And then the one without that, this cutout is going to face up. And then if you rotate this over, it doesn't have that extra little hole. So just make sure they're in the correct positions. And then when we torque these bolts down, the torque will be 11.1 foot-pounds. And you also want some oil on those bolt threads to make sure you get the correct torque. Now we can torque these down to 11.1 foot-pounds. Now we can remove these two bolts. We're going to clean up this gasket sealing surface and install the valve cover. And now we can tighten the valve cover bolts down to 7.4 foot-pounds. And now we're going to reconnect our breather hose. After that, we'll put in our spark plug and reinstall the cap. And once we've done that, we can reinstall our gas tank, our seat, and the side panel. And that's it for the valve adjustment on these 450s, 500, and 501s. If you need any parts, they're available on our website. And knowing how to do this is just going to save you time, money, and a lot of headache when you're out on the trail. So be sure to keep up on this maintenance schedule and subscribe to our channel for more helpful content. Thanks for watching.